Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I am John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Straightforward topic and informative. Let's do it. What simple mistake has ended lives? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. There have been too many instances of rock climbers rappelling off the ends of their ropes, which could have been easily avoided by tying stopper knots at the ends of their ropes. Therac 25, the world's deadliest software error, cost several radiation patients their lives by administering lethal amounts of radiation, and for a while, the doctors didn't even know. My dad was trying to unclog his kitchen drain and mixed drain cleaners by adding one, then adding another a few minutes later. It started bubbling, and he began coughing intensely. I heard him coughing from the other room, saw what happened, and opened the nearby window to get rid of the chlorine gas he just produced. I forgot there was a large hive of wasps that had moved into that window, and they did not appreciate this unexpected interruption. I took him to the emergency room for gas exposure, and it was tough explaining that the wasp stings were not why we were there. Respected cardiothoracic surgeon tells a guy to stop smoking right outside the hospital doors. Guy turns around and punches him a single time in the head. King hit, or coward punched, whatever you want to call it. He falls to the floor and hits his head a second time, on life support for 4 weeks. Nothing left to save. And I'm sure there are people out there that would say he shouldn't have told him to not smoke. Regardless of what you say, no one deserves a response like that. Immature, low impulse control. Just hope you rot in jail forever. Ignoring signs when cave diving. Bitch, they put a Grim Reaper on it. Turn around. In 1854, a woman named Sarah Lewis threw a diaper from her dying baby into a London cesspool, resulting in cholera, killing 616 people after it contaminated a popular well. Not knowing first aid. Estimates put 150,000 people die a year because people don't know how or have first aid handy. There has been other studies that shown the large chunk of people could have also possibly survived if they'd gotten first aid treatment by others or themselves. My neighbor let his 15-year-old drive on the interstate coming back from a Florida vacation because he was tired. He crossed the line, flipped the vehicle, and the entire family ultimately didn't make it. The impact of a quick fix for motor vehicle engine knocking in 1921. The true death toll is too difficult to extrapolate, but it really did a number on humanity. It led to all kinds of problems, including increased crime rates due to neurological toxicity. A statistically significant correlation has been found between the usage rate of leaded gasoline and violent crime. The violent crime curve virtually tracks the lead exposure curve with a 22-year time lag. A bunch of guys were working on an LNG line, and when they cut over to the new line, the pressure regulator sensors were still on the old disconnected line, so the system automatically started to boost the pressure up as it was sensing low pressure into the LNG lines when the sensors continued to be on a completely isolated system, causing multiple houses to basically explode due to unexpected high pressure in the system, all thanks to some idiot town council wanting to save money by not having the proper professionals work on the system. Mountain climbers coming down a steep cliff by rappelling down a long rope should always tie a knot in the end of the rope if they can't tell if the rope reached all the way to the ground or at least to a level spot from which to set up the next rappel. This is done to prevent the climber from rappelling right off the end of the rope and then free-falling the rest of the way. Sadly, some climbers don't take the time to do that, and every few years there's a report of someone getting killed simply because they did not tie a simple knot in the rope. Boy, somebody was really serious about reminding people to tie knots on the end of their rope, so if you're ever rappelling, make sure you tie knots on the end of your ropes. Eating rhubarb leaves as part of a salad. It's pretty rare, but it has happened when someone hasn't known what they were cooking with. Rhubarb leaves contain a lot of oxalic acid, which is poisonous in large doses. Doing fentanyl once destroyed my life for 3-ish years. I was a complete shell and zombie. Almost died too. Overdosed 4 times. Lucky I got my shit together and will be 5 months sober in 2 days. Good luck. basing test dummies on the proportions of the average man. Many women and children have died in car crashes because the seatbelt is up too high across their body, or the airbag hits at the wrong angle because it was designed to expand to accommodate a taller person. Just wish someone figured out not everyone is the same size before people died. There was this poor family, hard-working dad and stay-at-home mom. One day, their daughters is playing in their very small home and accidentally breaks the TV. They're poor, so they can't really buy a new TV. It's hard for them. Dad gets angry and hits the child. The kid goes in a corner and silently cries and cries. A few hours later, Mom and Dad notice that the kid doesn't make any noise. They thought she's sleeping, but she's not responding. They take her to a hospital. She had internal bleeding and dies. Dad leaves the hospital and Mom stays. A few hours later, she gets home and sees her husband hanging herself. Another one. An ambulance responds to an emergency in an apartment. They get in and see a middle-aged man having a heart attack. They try to take him to the hospital, but find out someone has slashed all the tires of the ambulance. Turned out, a neighbor saw the ambulance parked in front of his house. It was a really tight street and never anywhere to park in Tehran. He's pissed off that an ambulance is blocking his doorway, so decided to get revenge by slashing his tires, a method that is actually pretty common in a backward country like Iran. Because of him, the man that had a heart attack died before getting to the hospital. He was charged with murder. Iran's judiciary system is unforgiving, so he just got the execution or life. Both happened in Iran. A flight in Greece had a door that leaked pressurized air. To fix this, the ground crew set pressurization switches to manual. They left after the door issue was solved. This switch, being on manual, meant the plane did not pressurize properly after takeoff. The lack of pressure means the crew and passengers had the same level of oxygen as the outside air. At 35,000 feet without pressurized air, your brain becomes starved of oxygen, and you pass out from hypoxia. This happened to the pilots. The plane flew on autopilot until it ran out of fuel and crashed. A simple switch, being on manual, not auto, killed over 100 people. It was a simple mistake from the ground crew and pilots not to turn it back to auto. Forgetting to check the back seat of a car for children in car seats in the hot weather. It happens so often. And the sad thing is, a lot of the time, it's the parents that love their kids the most and are exhausted from giving parenting 100% that forget and lose their child. This is why you should leave your cell phone in the back seat next to your kid. If you get your kid, you'll probably remember within 10 minutes when you wonder where your phone is. In the heat, check the seat. My mom's an orthopedic RN, and a few nights ago she had a patient, 19 male, who was in a severe car crash. He was passing a car in front of him on a 2-lane road and going at least 30 over the speed limit. He didn't see the oncoming car until there was a head-on collision. He killed the passenger of the other vehicle, injured himself and the driver of the other vehicle, and killed his grandmother in the passenger seat and his 12-year-old little brother in the back seat instantly. After he is discharged from the hospital, he'll be faced with not only 3 counts of vehicular manslaughter and up to 30 years imprisonment, but also the horror, guilt, and regret of having killed his grandmother and his brother, and the passenger of the other vehicle. Pay attention on the road, and don't speed more than 10 miles over the limit. That is a recipe for disaster. This will get buried, but not looking both ways. My great-grandparents lived in a house on a state route. Speed limit's 55 miles per hour. Well, when they were younger, long before I was born, they had a young neighbor. Her name was Charlotte. She was 11. She tried to cross the street to look at the horses. Since it's on a state route, you get a lot more rural as you head down the road. The people across the street have a huge farm with horses. My great-grandparents were in their 40s or 50s when it happened. She didn't look both ways. She was hit, her skull completely cracking open. My grandmother wasn't home, fortunately, unfortunately, but my grandfather was. He found her, having to hold her skull together as her brain matter was splattered, while he tried to get others' attention to call paramedics. She didn't make it. She was just a little girl who wanted to see some horses, man. I wish she would have looked. That was nearly 50 years ago. Look both ways no matter what kind of road you're crossing. Enrico Fermi was working on transuranium elemental discoveries, meaning, at the time, he wanted to see if he could make new elements heavier than uranium by bombarding radioactive atoms with slow neutrons. He thought he discovered element 93, even won the Nobel Prize for it, but after further investigation, it was found that he got a few equations wrong, and it actually made a uranium atom explode. He accidentally discovered nuclear fission, the reason atomic bombs exist, all because of a few bad calculations. You ever wonder how many amazing discoveries happen just like this, by complete accident? I mean, some are better than others, and some are worse, but yeah, crazy. Live wires under the water. My dad's cousin and his friend very tragically died this way while still in college. They simply went to go swimming in a lake. The one jumped in first, didn't come back up. His friend jumped in after him, and just like that, they never came back up. Rest in peace, Christopher. My uncle went to a bar one night to let loose after a hard week of work. He stopped drinking a few years before, but he was known as the town drunk. He still had a ton of friends he cared about at the bar, so he would visit, drink a Pepsi, and have a laugh. Well, this time on his way out the door, a soldier from a nearby military base was waiting outside and looking for a fight. He punched my uncle, knocking him unconscious, then quickly left the scene. My uncle got up, staggering, and appeared to be intoxicated. During this time, the local police got called and they hauled him off to the drunk tank. The next morning, he was dead in his cell. When he was hit, it caused a small brain bleed, and he died in his sleep. He couldn't talk or express himself, so there was no way knowing what was wrong, and everyone thinks it's cool not to snitch nowadays. Henry Kissinger directing the indiscriminate bombing of Laos and Cambodia. One year, he's a college professor. The next, he's micromanaging the war in Vietnam. Resupply routes for the South ran through parts of Laos and Cambodia. The U.S. began to bomb those countries as part of the war in Vietnam, despite them not being part of the war. Bombs were carried by B-52s, which flew much too high to precision bomb individual ground targets. Generals would plan bombing campaigns, and Kissinger himself would redirect them to other targets based on nothing more than gut feelings. The redirects were so frequent that they stopped planning on their own and just had him tell the bombers where to go. To him, these were nothing more than grid squares, but on the ground these were villages filled with men and women and children. Thousands died.